This is George.
My name is George, Michelin Black Belt, long time.
And he's kind of an animal. And as I sat in my room, scared about the next time I'd have to roll with this pit bull, I came up with an idea. I grabbed 3 other high-level belts and we're gonna throw George into the Shark Tank.
I'm out.
George was going to be doing 4 2-minute rounds with no breaks, and his first opponent he was going up against was Jeff. Now Jeff has a few things going for him. He's obviously very tall, and he's also the first one in there, so he has enough time that he can start to tire out George for the rest of us. But since he's the first one in there, rest in peace, Jeff. Now something significant to remember is that right before this, we just had some other rolling, so George had already been moving for about 30 minutes. And you know it's a bad sign that after 30 minutes of rolling and just starting the Shark Tank, he's not even sweating yet. George starts to make a little bit of distance so he can move into the half guard, his favorite guard to use, but Jeff counters by trying to use his sides and he can sprawl out on the leg to add a lot of pressure towards George's leg. George has to pull him back in so he doesn't have to deal with that type of pass, and he's looking for his own Kimura. Now a pretty common defense to the Kimura is to try and use your head to make some space. Unfortunately that lands him right in George's guillotine, and George is going to sweep him over with the guillotine while locking onto the leg and maintaining control over his chin. This allows him to pull himself up, and now Jeff is going to have to deal with his top pressure. Now a little bit of saving grace is that Jeff is able to create enough distance with his butterfly hooks that George doesn't start a mount. But George is playing the smart game and he's not forcing any passes too quickly. He's using fluid motion and he pulls the legs to the side so he can bring his knee down to the mat. Then he's going to completely style on poor Jeff here by taking his back by throwing the leg over the shoulder. This is a beautiful transition and I'd love to do it on camera. It requires you to have good knowledge over your opponent's offense so he doesn't come up at the same time you bring your legs over, otherwise it's good night to the boys.
He's got your back. It's fine. It's fine.
And as Jeff would have you to believe that he's in a fine position, well, here's a spoiler. It's not a fine position. He leaves his arm extended and George quickly gets a tap over him before the round can end. Not only did he get a submission, he got a very stylish one before the next opponent could come in and save Jeff.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
In following up Jeff's performance is going to be our next competitor, Pam. Pam is a female black belt who also fights in Bellator and recently had a fight with Kat Zingano.
All right, next person. Go, 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 go.
She came in with a vengeance for George, and that's exactly what I like to see. After getting submitted so many times by him, you want to try and put any whooping you can on him, especially if he's getting tired. There's just one problem. Even though Pam is in a dominant position, George does not look concerned at all. He's reaching forward so he can grab her foot to bring her to her hip, then he rolls to his back. Normally this would be a really dangerous position to put yourself in, and I think even George realizes he's in trouble, but he's staying calm through the entire process. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I had a black belt put me in a crucifix, I'd start thinking I need to get out of here as fast as I could. It's really concerning when you're in a great spot and your opponent is in a terrible position, but they are more calm than you are. It starts to make you feel like you need to move, and Pam is trying to take the mount while maintaining control over this arm. But George actually wrestles up out of this terrible position, and now he's on top working in Pam's half guard. He does a nice job continuing to pressure her forward, but Pam's trying to bring her left arm in. The more that she can bring her arm in, she can create a post to frame against George as he's starting to bring the knee over her stomach. Pam eventually is able to frame with her left hand enough that she can get on top of George, and George can return to his favorite position, working on bottom from his half guard. Pam is trying to connect her hands so she could use a cradle to try and pass his guard, but George backs up just enough that it's too much of a reach and she's going to have to enter his guard with a new attack. She enters with her left knee as if she's looking for a knee cut, but George quickly stuffs it with his hand, nullifying the pass attempt. George shifts his weight just enough that Pam has to work to rebalance, but as she rebalances and comes back into him, his right leg came up high enough that now he can set up the omoplata sweep. That definitely is some high level rolling, and if you didn't quite catch it, replay it and watch it again because you should add that to your rolls. George then takes Pam out of her misery by applying a toe hold from the top and getting a nice submission. Apparently no one's coming out alive even though we're supposed to be beating up George. So our 2 opponents in on George, and he's not looking like he's worked a day in his life. And one of the key components is that George is not carrying our weight. He always has good frames in place with his legs or with his hands so that he doesn't have to worry about us being on top of him and applying too much force. Now for round 3, George is going to have to go up against Bobby Lee, a former Bellator fighter and a brown belt. Bobby also isn't wearing a gi, so George is going to be stripped of his favorite grips. Bobby's also a big dude, so I'm fully expecting that he can start to tire George out. But George is being crafty, already working on Bobby's leg, and there's one problem with Bobby. He hates heel hooks. But even if he isn't a big fan of them, he's still willing to attack the legs. He's looking to pull back on George's leg, potentially looking for a knee bar, but George continues to roll through, so Bobby Lee regains his composure and comes back on top. The largest issue rolling with talented individuals is knowing how to approach their guard. Bobby can't pass, so instead he's going to wind up going for a heel hook, and this happens.
going. Go, go, go.
Now that's a big oof to Bobby's ego because he got tapped so quickly, but I'm sure that won't ever happen again. I love seeing that Bobby wants to work reverse top half, but it wasn't a good choice apparently because George swept him over with no issue. He grabbed over the neck as if he was going towards the guillotine, but Bobby's able to squirm his way out of there and start attacking the leg. Now Bobby has some wrestling experience, so every time he's on his back, he does a nice job popping right back up and trying to get on top of George. But sometimes he pushes a little bit too hard and winds up in a worse position. Right now it's working out pretty well for him as he's attacking the neck, potentially setting up an anaconda or a guillotine. He tries to throw the leg over for mount so he can do a mounted guillotine, but George is able to bring his instep in just enough. George still is stuck on his back however, so Bobby's in a good spot where he can start to arch and apply some pressure and potentially force a choke. He is over the knee this time as the leg comes over, but George still is remaining calm throughout the entire process.
30 seconds.
Now this is one of my favorite submissions, going for the one-handed guillotine from mount with all that top control, so it doesn't bode well for me that George was able to escape it so quickly. Bob must believe that his heel hook game just got drastically better because he falls back for another one, but George quickly pushes his own leg off, hits him with an inverted heel hook, and gets another tap.
You're good. 10 seconds.
It's not looking good for Team Shark Tank because my 3 companions could not take out George. I'm the last one up, and just like Bobby, I was not going to be wearing the gi, so George won't be able to grab me how he'd like to. My game plan coming in was to try and put some pressure on George and not let him frame against me as much as he has been with the other people. I start moving around and I am able to apply a lot more pressure coming down onto him as I can bring my butt over his knee and start to establish a far side underhook. Unfortunately, this doesn't work out the best for me because he establishes a butterfly hook, and with this he creates enough leverage that he can start to move me around and he gets an easy sweep. But I do try to use this to my advantage. I go towards single leg X and I go at the back door looking for a heel hook, then transitioning into the calf slicer. If I would have drove forward a little bit more or grabbed a body lock over his chest, I may have been able to finish a calf slicer for George. Unfortunately, he rolled to his back and he freed himself from the attack, but I winded up on top.
Let's go, Tyler!
Now his frames were getting in my way just like they were against everybody else, so this was creating a large issue for me. Again, I'm trying to push forward as much as I can and trying to work around the frames, but either way it was a hard task to try and get around this guard. He also countered my underhook by going towards an omoplata, and I had a brand new battle to try and fight. I've always thought I was pretty good at defending against the omoplata. I had a strong base, and since I wasn't wearing a gi, it'd be a lot harder for him to try and pull me over. I didn't want to try and pass my legs over his head because the second I do that, he will definitely finish the sweep. Now every once in a while I'll make a pretty stupid mistake. I was finally able to free my arm, and you know what I did exactly after that? I put my arm right back in the hole and he started attacking with a straight arm lock. I really wanted that underhook, but that was definitely the wrong time to go for it. I fought off the arm lock just enough, but I had to go over his head and I eventually gave him the sweep, and now I had to deal with George on top of me. George was trying to open me up so he could submit me as well, just like my companions, but I wanted to bring my knees in as fast as I could. I was able to work up to my knees, and now I had a little bit of wrestling I could do without wearing the gi. As he tried to take my back, I brought my arm in just enough to keep him in front of me, then I wound up on top of him, and unfortunately I had a new threat to deal with. The Kimura. And to make it worse, this was move of the day. This exact same position he showed us just before this class, he threw me into the Kimura and he ripped this guy out to complete his sweep. Thankfully he let go as he was looking towards the position and he tried to go for a choke, but I just survived until the end of the round. Turns out it wasn't George getting shark tanked, it was all of us. Congrats to George, he did awesome, and I can't believe none of us could submit him. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.